My thanks to XENA Foundation for hosting this event and giving me this opportunity. Warm welcome to new members as well as those who've been with us a long time. This talk is essentially on Bach flower remedies and the importance of healing at the emotional level. Last week, I spoke on the emotion of anger and pointed out that anger is actually one of the most common and yet one of the most destructive of emotions that we have. Destructive to our relationships, destructive to our health. Today, I'm going to discuss fear. And fear is in the same class that it pervades everything we do to some extent. It could be fear of failure, business failure, physical, sexual, exams, fear of public speaking. Fear is an emotion that runs through our system completely. And unfortunately, it is parents who inculcate fears in children when they are young. Don't do this, you'll get ill. Don't eat that. Don't drink this. Don't take a bus alone. Don't do, a number of things because they transfer their anxiety onto you. And it's actually really, really bad. One of the worst, of course, is fear of failure. Parents don't teach children how to fail. Those of us who are athletes and sports people, we know failure from the sports field. You don't win every match. You get used to losing some and winning some. So it's a great teacher. But parents don't consciously, knowingly push children to the point where they actually fail and learn how to handle failure. And this affects everything they do later in life. Now, the Bach Remedies book describes three kinds of fear. There is rock rose, which is fear that comes after a shock, like an accident. A friend had a car crash, and for 10 years she couldn't drive the car again. There was that shock in her mind. Then there is what you call phobias, fear of known things, fear of rats, cockroaches, fear of flying, fear of public speaking. Okay? And these fears tend to inhibit us and bother us. And of course, one of the most dangerous of fears is fear of sickness, health, and fear of death. They all come under the Mineralist category. And then there is the fear that some people have for which they cannot give a cause. They will tell you, I'm afraid, but they can't tell you why they are afraid. These are usually sensitive people who pick up vibes from others, they pick up energies from others, and very often they are scared with no reason. But the fear is as real. Just can't tell you why they're afraid, but they're afraid. Okay. Now, in my 40 years experience, I have identified not three, but 8 distinct types of fear. But actually, when I was doing one of my teaching sessions, I was able to explain to my student that out of 38 remedies for emotions, more than 20 have fear at their root. For example, the remedy agrimony, which is for people who suppress their emotions. And if you ask why they suppress their emotions, the answer is fear of retribution. Whether it's a wife who doesn't speak up to her in-laws, or you know, member of your staff who can't speak up and explain why they have a problem with someone in office, that fear of retribution is there. And as you go down the line of Bach remedies, you'll find almost every alternate remedy has fear at its root. People are afraid of something, and it's probably the greatest contributor to failing, to lack of success. Because as I say, if you don't try, you've already failed. And many people don't try because they're afraid of failure. And I've seen this with my own children and had to consciously teach them, kiddos, at least try it. Even if you don't succeed, it doesn't matter. At least you tried. If you sit back and say, no, I'm afraid of the river, I'm afraid of the hill, I'm afraid of X or Y, how will you progress in this world? Tomorrow you're going to grow up, you're going to be on your own, you're going to go to college, live in hostels, everything will be strange, will be unknown. How will you function with fear inside you? You must learn. And I remember there's a saying, I think it was George Bernard Shaw, who said that my life has been full of such horrible, nasty incidents, 80% of which never happened. We even fear that which has not happened. It's unlikely to happen, but we tend to be afraid. So as I said, fear runs through all kinds of things. But there are certain specific fears that we really need to deal with. The first I'm going to pick up, they say, is the remedy Aspen, which is for people who are scared without knowing the cause of their fear. Maybe they're just oversensitive, or they're just used to being afraid. They've been brought up to be afraid, and it may not be a specific thing that they're afraid of, but they're full of fear. It's not a good fear. And Aspen as a remedy is therefore very soothing to all people, because many of these are unknown, unnoticed, call them undocumented fears. The next fear is very significant. It's the remedy cherry plum. It's a fear of losing control. The fear that I'm going to lose it, I'm going to do something, I'm going to hit somebody, or I'm going to hurt someone in some way, correct? And above all, this is the fear that deals with suicide, the fear of losing control and jumping out of the balcony. And it's one of the most important remedies to give, especially to children, because very often children will talk of falling, getting hurt, dying if the fan falls on them. And you really need to get this fear out of their head. Okay. The next well-known fear is, as I said, is actually elm. That is the fear of being overwhelmed. I've got too much to do. How will I manage? I can't cope. Okay. I can't finish the jobs that are on my table. And actually that fear leads to paralysis. Because we're afraid that we won't succeed, we don't even try sometimes. We go into a state of catatonia. So it's a common fear. I hear this all the time, but so much to do, I don't know where to begin. Okay. Elm is a beautiful remedy that tells us, listen, go systematically, maybe start with the small things, start clearing your list of things to be done, and before you know it, you'll be through most of your list. But this fear is very often expressed by people. I've got too much on my plate. I don't know how I'll do it. The next fear that is common, or rather too common, is a minimalist fear. It's fear of everything from cockroaches to rats to public speaking to fear of flying. And it actually really ruins life for a lot of people. I've seen grown women afraid of kittens. They're afraid the kitten is going to attack them and eat them up and God knows what. But they've been brought up by their parents with that fear and they carry it forward even when they're adults. Okay. So Minimalist is a very commonly used remedy. And again, it's one that applies to almost everyone. There are there's some things that almost all of us are a little afraid of. We may not even realize it, but the minimalist fear lives in all of us. There's a fear which is attached to the remedy on being. And the best way to describe it is performance anxiety. Now, it could be performance before an exam, public speaking. It can even be sexual performance, where a person gets paralyzed by the fear that he will not be able to perform. And in fact, he cannot perform. Okay. Hornbeam is a remedy to deal with what we call anticipatory fear. Before an event like a performance in the theater or performance and an exam, that person gets scared. Call it stage fright. But once they start doing it, it's all okay. Okay. This fear usually happens before you get out to do something. And actually, it affects a lot of things, especially in the area of business, where people, because they're afraid of failing, afraid of loss, they actually don't take the risk. So it gets in our way. And as I said, because it is anticipatory fear, it can be very troubling. I've known a very well-known choreographer who used to sit on the back stairs before a performance, literally chewing his nails because he's done a great job. Everything is going to go fine. But he's totally scared of how the performance will go. I've actually gone up in one case, given this guy some remedies, and then he's relaxed and he's enjoyed his own show. Otherwise, an entire performance is actually torture for him, even though he's done a good job. Okay. Coming down the road, there is this fear that doesn't seem significant, but it is. And that is the fear for others, the red chestnut. This is what I talked about when I said parents inoculate us with fear. Because the parent is anxious, they are scared in their life, they will put fear into the child. If the child comes home 10 minutes late, they're already getting upset and sick. And it's actually as bad for the person they're afraid of and as bad for their own health. This fear leads to extreme anxiety, stomach aches, stomach issues, all kinds of things, all kinds of these issues. It's a fear for others. It's not a fear for oneself. I know people who, for their own sake, are not bothered at all. They're terribly worried about their children. And they think that anxiety will help and protect the child. Actually, that anxiety works in reverse. Such children don't develop confidence. And only when they grow older do they realize how much damage has been done. Because their parents' anxiety and fear stop them from doing things. And this can happen in all areas. You know, if I didn't encourage my daughter to get into the river and get her feet wet, she would never know the joy of flowing water, the sense of, what a river is about. If I did not encourage her to climb a hill, she would never know that joy of looking out over everything and having this lovely feeling of being on top of the world. Okay? Now, this is a common fear with kids, fear of getting into an elevator. Okay? And it's very common in school. And actually, many of the children I deal with are experiencing fear of some kind or the other. Fear of teachers, fear of people in authority. Okay. And as I said, it's one of the most inhibiting types of fear because it stops you trying. And the thing is, if you didn't try, you fail. You might as well try. So, Mineralist is a remedy that almost everyone needs to use at some time. And when they use it, they will realize that it relieves their anxiety, it creates a sense of confidence, allows them to function, and once they gain confidence, next time they don't need the remedy. So, on beam, Mineralists are
You're muted. You're muted.
sorry, the child inherits those fears. Okay. So when I hold the phone horizontally, the switch comes under my hand. Okay. So, a lot of mother parents, oh, but I'm afraid for him. I don't have any fear. That's all right. But your fear for the child hurts the child. My mother had a very lovely solution. She told me, she said, listen, if you are somewhere 10 feet up in the sky and you're somewhere in this known area, do what the hell you want to do. Okay? You can tell me about it. But if you're going to climb 30 feet up in the tree or go wandering alone in the hills, don't tell me about it. I don't want to be anxious. You do what you want. As a child, I cannot and should not inhibit you. Just don't tell me you're doing these stupid things. You come home, I'll mop up your blood, I'll do whatever when you're hurt, but I don't want to know because I get anxious. And my anxiety is not a good thing for you as a growing child. I respected that very much. Many times I would come home with my head bleeding and something this, quietly have my mother deal with it. No lectures, no nothing. Didn't even ask me what the hell did you do that you fell and you got hurt so badly. I don't want to know. Because the anxiety of the parents passes on to the child. And that is not a good thing. I can go through all of these remedies. As I said, rock rose is a remedy for shock. Because you had a bad incident once, you are unwilling to try that same thing further down in the road. And I've often talked to people and said, you're exhibiting signs of fear. What has happened in your life? And they'll say, oh, no, nothing has happened, this, that. I said, sorry, something has happened. I said, oh, yeah, once I fell into the lake and I almost drowned. Once while I was driving, I almost hit a deer on the road. They don't realize they have buried these incidents in their mind, but they are creating an atmosphere of fear. That is the remedy rock rose. And it's a very soothing remedy and a very necessary remedy. That if you have any such events in your life, that have left a mark on you, you should get them out of your system. What is wrong with this thing? What is wrong with this? Sorry, my window is just minimized and I'm not able to get it back up again.
You have to reposition your.
Right, Rajiv, this is a problem with Zoom. It does things.
Hey, it is not a problem with Zoom. It is a problem with the device that you're handling. That is why if you're logging from your phone, that is why it is suggested to have it on the stand.
No, normally when you tap the small window, you see the little arrows.
Nothing is going to happen. Or these are, you just initiate and you put it on the frame.
I'm going to hold it up straight. The sideways thing gets too many things in contact with the fingers. Okay, so rock rose is a remedy for terror. Let me use that word, correct? It's not just fear. It's the fear, the shock which has got into your system, and it is extremely, it's difficult to get out, but it's very important to get past it. That shock affects a lot of things that you do or rather don't do. And if you're asked why you don't do it, oh, this happened when I was young, so I'm always afraid of X, Y, Z. Now, as I said, fear comes in many shapes and forms. Be surprised when you look at people and you ask them questions, and you'll find so much of their behavior is governed by the things they are afraid of. Okay. And one of the nice things about Bach remedies is that it deals with these kinds of fear. Okay. What else? What are the other significant fear remedies? Of course, one of the common fears is fear of relationships. Okay. The fear of getting emotionally hurt. And there is a remedy called Star of Bethlehem that deals with this kind of trauma. Okay. It's similar to the fear of death, anticipation. I know people who don't get into relationships because they're afraid of the pain if something doesn't work out. Okay. But not every relationship is going to work. You have to try, you may get hurt, you may suffer the pain of that, but it doesn't mean that you should not try. But very common, especially with the early years, 16 to 22 or something, where people genuinely avoid getting into relationships. They're afraid of the consequences of getting emotionally hurt. Star of Bethlehem deals with emotional hurt of all kinds. And it's a remedy that is very necessary. It's also combined very often with Mineralist for fear of death. If you've lost a loved one, especially children, If they lose a mother, father, or someone significant, this trauma lives within them. Now, because fear is often associated with events in our past, there is one remedy that is usually used as a accompaniment, and that is the remedy walnut. Walnut breaks links with the past. I know people who take pills and pop drugs because they are afraid of flying. And every time they have to fly, they go through it. I know someone who used to travel like every 2 weeks for her work and was constantly taking pills to avoid. Now, Minimalist is the remedy for such a phobia. But Minimalist is best accompanied by walnut. We had this lady from the Bach Center teaching us and telling us, oh, I take Minimalist a lot because I have a fear of travel. I've been taking it for 2 years. And they didn't really like anyone coming up with radical ideas, but I wanted to tell her. I said, I usually cure such phobias in 2 weeks. The reason you are not getting cured of this particular phobia is that there is some incident, event in your past that has created this fear. And unless you combine walnut with the mimulus, this fear will not go. But if you take walnut first, bring up that memory, bring up the fear, and then you take the mimulus, you'll be surprised at how easily the fear goes away. And I've done this with a lot of friends. I have a friend who says, I can't go on a holiday because my wife won't sit in an aircraft. Now, somewhere in her past, there is an incident that has created this fear. And you need to deal with it at that level. You need to let the past go in order to let the fear go. And I had tremendous success when I combined walnut with rock rose, walnut with mimulus, walnut with aspen, and deal with the past. Somewhere in our lives, as we grow up, we need to let the events of our past go. We need to put them behind us. Yes, it happened once. We fell down, we got hurt, X happened, we had an accident. But you can't live in that fear. And unfortunately, too many people live in fear. Fear of A, B, C, something, something, something. And it genuinely affects your health. You can't fall asleep because there is fear of business failure, and you can't sleep. You end up with acidity, you end up with constipation, you end up with all kinds of stomach issues, and you can also end up with high blood pressure. And it affects your health in every way. And the reason for this is that fear releases adrenaline into your body. That's a normal effect of fear, fight or flight. But if you do not consume the adrenaline, whether in sports or some way, that adrenaline breaks down into histamine. And then all the allergies begin. Because now you have a different chemical flowing through your body that is very closely related to asthma, allergies, all kinds of issues. Okay. And people don't realize that their fear is making them ill. So what does fear have to do with my acidity? I just think about it. You're tense, you're worried. You're not going to digest your food properly. You won't sleep comfortably. Fear is at the root of so many of our illnesses. Okay? Anxiety over some business is one thing. Okay, that's normal. It's bound to happen. But if that anxiety translates into raw fear, then it starts to affect your health. And these fear remedies come up into use in almost every case I deal with. Today I'm dealing with children. And very early I have to deal with their fears. That fear stops performance in school. The fear could be of a teacher. It could be of being embarrassed, of making a mistake. Okay. I had a classmate of mine who came second once and he was afraid to go home. He said, my father is going to beat me because I came second and not first. Okay. So back to my original point, unfortunately, parents are responsible for instilling fear in their children. The greatest gift you can give your child is courage, confidence. Don't put fear into children.